Did he rise from the dead? If that happened, that's a game changer. Now, here's the other thing. If you're in this room right now and you just don't think that those kinds of things could happen, I am not going to change your mind. But I want you to think about this for a second. If the investigation you're starting is an investigation to see whether or not the supernatural is reasonable, to see whether or not the supernatural things actually happen, if that's the thing you're investigating, you can't start that investigation with a bias against the supernatural. Do you know what I mean? I remember I talked about this in the book. I had a case where we get to this crime scene, and there's a lady who's dead on the bed. She's half dressed, and my senior partner, who's 15 years senior to me, says, this is going to be a boyfriend-girlfriend murder. Look at her. Look on her nightstand. You got a picture of him with her with some guy. Who's that guy? Look at her closet. Her closet's half empty. All the girls' clothes are packed in, and this side is empty. It's got one men's jacket. What woman has a closet that's half empty? Think about it. You find the guy whose clothes are missing, who's in that picture, that's going to be our killer. We wasted a week looking for her boyfriend when she had no boyfriend. None. That was her brother. She was Korean. It was New Christmas Eve. He went back to Korea, took his clothes and left. She was killed that night when she was by herself after he left. No boyfriend. She was 56 when she died. Now, because we had a faulty assumption, a presupposition, we decided before we started looking what our conclusion was. We decided we're looking for a boyfriend. If you think that up front, you'll spend a lot of time wasting your time. If you decide up front that naturalism is true, that no supernatural events could ever occur, well, trust me, you'll end up there because you started there. You have to suspend your disbelief and put it on the shelf for just a minute to see if this is the most reasonable inference from evidence if I didn't first hold a bias against the supernatural. And then if everything else works for you except that it is supernatural, start to examine whether or not your bias is what's keeping you from that conclusion. That make sense? All right. So it all comes back to whether or not we can trust the resurrection is true. Because even if you knew nothing about Jewish prophecy, you knew nothing about a coming Messiah, but you had to deal with this guy who rose from the dead, that would be enough for you to kind of scratch your head and think, I got to reconsider my presuppositions against the supernatural because this guy rose from the dead. So what's that about? How did he do that? I really wasn't interested as an atheist in the entire history of Judaism up to Jesus, okay? I was interested, did that thing happen? And when I got to the place where I thought, wow, you know, the only thing that's keeping me from buying this is that I don't believe in supernatural stuff, that's when I started to look at the evidence for God's existence. It wasn't until I was convinced that the eyewitness accounts in the Gospels were reliable that I said, well, maybe I've been wrong about the whole God thing. Let me go back and look at the evidence for God's existence. And that's what I did next. But I'm going to tell you, there's stuff in the room, this is the next book I'm writing right now, there's stuff in the room of the universe you cannot explain from inside the room. Think about that for a second. The first conversation I ever had with my dad, I had with my wallet. And I pulled out my wallet. We were sitting at a water park. And I said, Dad, just walk with me for a second on this. Look, I got this wallet here. And in my wallet, I have $1. Look at the dollar. It's a pretty interesting dollar. It's got the face of George Washington on it. It's got writing on it, specificity. Tell me, Dad, I want you to tell me how the dollar got in my wallet. But I want you to stay inside the wallet for an explanation. Well, you put it in your wallet. No, I'm outside the wallet. I can't be used as an explanation. I want you to explain to me how the dollar got in the wallet, but stay inside the wallet for an explanation. That's a stupid question. Well, just be imaginative. Well, there's only a couple of answers. Well, one, it's always been in the wallet. It's been in the wallet as long as the wallet's been together. That's a stupid answer. But if that was the case, we'd all be buying wallets, right? They all have money in them. The other option is that there was stuff in the wallet that over time shaped into $1. What's this sound like to you guys? There's stuff inside the physical, natural universe that I don't think naturalism can explain. I don't think it can explain the beginning of the universe to begin with. Because even the scientists will tell us that everything that was here, space, time, and matter, that's what we consider to be the elements of naturalism. But whatever started this has to be atemporal, non-spatial, immaterial. So it has to be, if you want to call it supernatural, extra-natural, or something other than natural. Right? How are you going to explain consciousness from inside this room? How do material things eventually become an immaterial? How do you explain free will in a deterministic physical universe? How do you explain the appearance of design in biology or the origin of life? How do you explain transcendent moral principles that we believe are true? We respect them. How do we even explain the existence of evil if there is no objective standard of righteousness by which we can define evil? If it's just a matter of opinion, you can get rid of evil tomorrow. Just change your mind. Change your opinion. But we can't get rid of it that way. There's got to be something where you see, these are the problems that naturalism has. You can't explain the dollar from inside the wallet. You can only explain all the things you see in the dollar from an agent outside the wallet that would put it in.
What happened that caused you to move from cynic to really investigate the claims of Christ?
Okay, so what happened for me was my wife and I were together 18 years, and she was somebody who was raised kind of like as a cultural Catholic, but really never attended church. And when we started having kids, she's like, hey, we should probably go to church once in a while. So once in a while, she would drag me to church. About once or twice a year, but not every year. So I managed to get out of it a lot of times. And she respected my position on this, and she really had no idea what Christianity was about anyway. So, and it was always a Catholic mass. She didn't know anything other than Catholicism. So I was 35, and I had been at the same house for about 3 years, and we had not gone to church in those 3 years, so I had been very skilled for those 3 years. I avoided church. And she said, hey, we can go to church tomorrow if you want. I'm like, I would be more than happy to go to church for my wife as a non-believer, because my dad has been doing that for his entire life. He goes to Mormon wards. Do you know how long the service is at a Mormon ward? It's long. And he goes to those. He's an atheist. And by the way, if you're going to church right now as an atheist with your kids, you're doing a great job of teaching them how to go to church as an atheist with their kids. That's exactly what I was doing. So I decided to go, and there's this huge mega church in California. Huge. And she said, well, I thought we'd go to the Catholic church. There's a Catholic church around the corner. I said, we can go to the St. Killian's. Well, no, Bill's been asking us to go to this church. I don't want to go to that. It's like a circus. But we went. And the pastor there, he really is good at this one thing. He's good at a lot of things, but this one thing he's really good at pitching Jesus in a way that atheists can catch him. Basically, this Jesus guy, hey, he's really smart. I don't know what you think about Jesus, but I can tell you this, he's really smart. He's got good advice. You might want to listen to what he has to say. As an ancient sage, you won't find anybody better than Jesus. You know, Buddha, I don't care who you're talking about, Baha'u'llah, whoever it is, Jesus has got his chops. You should go check him out because he's got some things to say. Well, that intrigued me. Okay, so I bought a Bible only because I wanted to mine out the proverbial wisdom of Jesus, the red letters of Jesus. Let's see what he has to say. I am not at all interested in any silliness about miracles at all. But I do want to say, well, look, if this is time-tested, vetted wisdom that we built a culture on, it probably it stood the test of time. It might be worth my attention. So I bought the Bible. I think I spent $6. It was a pew Bible. You probably have those in this church. It had really tiny margins. But I bought that Bible, and I ripped through it all, and I right away became very, I wasn't trying to prove it was wrong. I wasn't trying to prove it was right. I just wanted to mine out the red letters to see if there's anything I could actually, I, by the way, have read all the writings of Baha'u'llah, the Baha'i faith. There's lots of this kind of stuff that I would read and reject it as divine. Just some interesting stuff. Well, I did that, and the problem, of course, with the Gospels is that those red letters are embedded in a historical narrative. And then I'm reading them and going, that thing right there, that is a lot like an eyewitness account. That thing right there resembles some of the stuff I've been working. And that piqued my interest. I'll go one more level with you. So at the time, I was working as an investigator using something called forensic statement analysis with bad guys. We get them in custody the day after a murder, give them a piece of paper, one-sided, 24 lines, Give them an ink pen. You have as much time as you want, but you can only use one side of the paper. I want you to write down everything you did yesterday on the day of the murder, from the time you got up in the morning to the time you went to bed. Here you go. Can't turn the paper over. Well, heck, now they're going to start writing this stuff out, right? Everything they did. But they only have 24 lines. If they've been up for 12 hours, that means they're going to get 2 lines per hour. Well, sometimes they're going to spend 6 lines describing 10 minutes of activity. Sometimes they'll skip over 4 hours of activity and I haven't mentioned it at all. I can usually tell by how they use personal pronouns, how they use tensed verbs, a lot of other things they teach you. I can usually tell if he was trying to deceive me and what time of day he was trying to deceive me about. So I thought, what if I applied this technique to the Gospel of Mark? I wanted to apply it to some gospel, and I couldn't figure out which one to apply it to. But then when I heard that Papias said that Mark's gospel was written underneath Peter in Rome, I thought, okay, here we go. Now we can test a gospel, because this gospel should have Peter's fingerprints in it in a way that no other gospel has, right? After all, Mark allegedly wrote it from Peter. I can use forensic statement analysis to see if Peter is hidden in there. Turns out he's hidden in there. It's little stuff, it's like, you know how stupid Peter is in the Gospels, right? He's always saying something stupid. Read through Mark's Gospel. He says much less stupid stuff in Mark's Gospel. Oh my gosh. He looks like a genius in Mark's Gospel, okay? As a matter of fact, even when he says something stupid in Mark's Gospel, Mark will say, then Peter said this stupid thing, and all the other disciples agreed. I'm not kidding. Check it yourself. I'm thinking, really? There's 2 Gospels where where Jesus is walking on water, right? Right? And what happens? Peter sees him walking on water. What does he do? Jumps out of the boat. Walks over to Jesus, starts to sink, and he's kind of scolded by Jesus. Oh, you have little faith, in front of all of his buddies in the boat. That doesn't happen in Mark. That happens in Matthew. Mark, he doesn't even get out of the boat. Doesn't mean he's lying. We all have a way of telling our story from our perspective. So I wrote a whole chapter on this in Cold Case, but that was one of the processes I went through in just trying to get a grasp on whether I could trust these documents were really eyewitness accounts.
My son's world history high school freshman teacher said that the Bible can't be used as a reliable source, and he can't use it in the class for historical sources. Young kids' minds believe what's taught in school. Can you comment on what you would do in this class?
This is what we talk about. There's a great book out there called Tactics by Greg Kokel, who's a friend of mine. It's a great book. And Greg's a great guy, by the way. And he's got a ministry called Stand to Reason, which I served at for about 1.5 years. I just got so busy I couldn't stay with him. But trust me, if you ever need resources, str.org is a great place to go, too. And I can tell you, this book is wonderful because it teaches you the 2 most important questions you can ever ask in that context. What should you do there? Ask the 2 most important questions of your teacher. What do you mean by that? And why do you think that's true? Or how'd you come to that conclusion? So when someone makes a claim in a class, like this claim, you can't trust the Bible as historical. Well, what do you mean by that you can't trust it? Like, why can't you trust it? Just ask these questions. Because what you're going to you don't have to he made a statement, the teacher made a claim. It's up to the person who makes the claim to defend their claim. You don't have to make a counterclaim. Let's get him to defend his claim first before you make a counterclaim. Because what you're going to discover is, as you ask this person to defend their claim, they really can't defend it. Because they made that claim off the top of their head without any real reason, without any real evidence. We know what the evidence is. So if we're going to get to that point, we say, well, you can't trust it because you won't have a single document until the 3rd century. Well, what document are you talking about? Well, I don't really know the name of the document, but it's a document in the 3rd century. Well, there's a lot of documents in the 3rd century. Which document are you talking about? You just need to back these guys down until they show everyone they don't have any idea what they're talking about. Because we already know, if you do the work, then you do know what you're talking about. You can actually find a way to back them into this exposure without having to ever make a claim about what you believe. So it is about a tactical, I think, assessment of how you approach these topics.